small indie studios don't have the budget, so they don't pay very well. What are your thoughts on the pay ranges that are available? And when you're applying for work, what should we be expecting if we're going for an indie studio or we're going for a big AAA company? Any thoughts, Rick? What do you think?
Yeah. Okay, so that sounds like it's being asked by someone who's relatively new in their journey, in working in the games industry or working, creatively. So if you're relatively new, you're not quite sure what's being paid yet, you kind of need to take whatever's being offered, so long as it's enough for you to get out of it what you need to get out of it. So it's really important, if you're working for someone and you think the pay is really not very much, then you're getting something else out of it. For example, they give you permission to use those assets in your portfolio or to use whatever thing you've created, and you can say, look, I made this. They're going to introduce you to other people, or they're going to write a really lovely recommendation if you do a good job. They also, in the negotiation, so when you're first talking to someone, they're like, well, we can pay you whatever. And we'll get to that in a moment, what the whatevers might be. We can pay you whatever. And you might look at that and say, oh, that's less than I could get, sweeping the streets. That doesn't really sound very fair. Then I think the conversation I would have would be, okay, so what's your budget? What do you think this particular role is worth to you and your team? It's great to use words like, what's this worth to you and your team? And then they can say, well, it's worth, $5 an hour. You look at that and you say, okay, that's not what I would expect, but that's what they're offering. So you can say, cool. Is it okay with you if we work together, if you want to work with me, that we do that for 2 months? And what I would like to suggest is that it's $20 an hour. However, I need to prove to you that I'm worth $20 an hour. So can you list out for me what I would need to do to be worth $20 an hour in this particular role? What value can I bring? What would I need to create? They might say, well, no, it's impossible. We don't have $20 an hour. That's just out of the question. So cool. They might say that's that. That's okay if that's the case. But what you're trying to go for in this conversation is, I'm happy to start where you want me to start, but I would like to have a conversation after a couple of months. You don't say after a week. That's a bit too soon for you to have proved yourself. And you don't say after a year, because then you're sitting there the whole time like, $5 an hour. But you need to put a date against that and be very clear what it is that you need to do to progress to the next stage. So that would be the first way that I would tackle that. And then also, what else can you get out of it? Recommendations or opportunities, or you get to work on something you haven't worked on before. Exposure, all those things are really valuable when you're starting out. Do you have a feel on, like, you're in the UK, I'm in Australia, I worked in North America for a decade, so we've kind of got those more Western countries, a bit of an idea of what people pay. I wouldn't know in Eastern Europe or in South America. I would only know from freelancers that I've contracted myself. But do you have a starting point in terms of like exact specific numbers?
Now that's interesting because yes, it's I suppose we've got a sort of minimum wage here, which is about £8 to £9 sort of thing. But it really depends on this person, doesn't it? Like you say, and what position this person is in, and their expectations might be too high for their level. So we were talking about portfolio earlier. If they're not up to scratch, then in fact getting a job at an indie studio at minimum wage is brilliant, because you're learning on the job, you're building your portfolio. So that you are exactly what you said, Rick, about it's what you are getting from it. And yes, you're not getting much money, but you're getting experience, you're getting contacts, which we talked about again in another question. So it's what are you getting out of it that's beyond just the money. If you've got a great portfolio, then maybe you should be expecting to get more the sort of between 20, 30, and if you're really good, 30, 40, 50. This is in thousands of pounds in this country, and that would be considered a good wage here. But this industry it can be very tough. So you've got to be really good to get up that ladder and have lots of experience, lots of contacts to get there as well. And at that point, then you're probably not so worried about whether this indie studio or this indie studio is paying well. So I think you're right, Rick, in identifying that they're probably early on and maybe their expectations are a bit high, but think about what they're getting out of not just pay. Because some people pay to go to college and learn, or they do unpaid internships and things like that. So if you've got the opportunity to earn minimum wage but still get those qualifications that you would have got at college because you're building a portfolio, then that's where it should be.
Yeah, the most difficult job to get is the first one. Like once you get your foot in the door, you can leverage that to get the next thing. You know, you hear things, you see things, you get better at what you're doing, and you have a better understanding of what your value is as well. And just this person was asking for exact numbers. So I think if I was to be hiring a junior artist, we'll use artists because I know a lot of your community are art focused. And if I was looking for a developing country, then I'd expect people be bidding at kind of like $5 an hour or $10 an hour if someone is stronger from those more developing countries, or more junior in one of the the North America, Australia, Europe type places. Then maybe it's kind of $20 an hour. If someone's getting quite good at what they're doing, $30, $40, $50 an hour. If someone's really, really good, then maybe $100 an hour. And when I use the dollars per hour, that's just a starting point for this conversation. That a lot of times it can be in your benefit to get a price per project or a price per object or per output. So say, for example, someone wants to employ you to create character assets, character models. And they might say, oh, we're willing to pay you a certain amount per hour. If you can reorganize that conversation to say, well, what would be your budget per character? And then if you work quickly and efficiently, you can get more done and you can be more valuable to them in a quicker time. So then you can say, well, it's maybe $100 per thing or per product. So, it's really, really difficult. Negotiations suck, right? Negotiations are tough and they're difficult. The more you do them, the more you get information, the easier they become. It's like, oh, I know that these people pay that, I've paid that, so you just $40 an hour, there we go. Or, this job's worth, $18,000. You just kind of know after a while. But at the starting point, you just need to ask. And the good way to ask is, what's this worth to you? What's your budget for this? What are you paying for this? And if it's an indie studio and they've only got a tiny budget and they're really not paying very much, then just accept that for what it is and see if you can get your foot in the door, do that for a certain amount of time, and then say, look, I'm kicking butt here. I'm really good. Let's talk about leveling up. But you want to have that conversation at the start so they're not surprised by it and they don't think, oh, we had a deal. What are you doing here? You say, yep, I'll come along for whatever you want to pay me for these first couple of months. And then on the agreement that after 2 months, we'll rediscuss this. And if we think that I'm bringing more value based upon your criteria, Mr. or Mrs. Employer, then we'll increase that. That's how I'd approach that.
Yeah. I think that's a good answer to quite a tough question, really. And I think it's a question that lots of people have.